I got to ask the Purdy guy the Purdy question. Larry, Jalen Hurts, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl victory, 2 good performances. He beat Mahomes. Has he surpassed Brock Purdy in your estimation?
I mean, these games have to mean something, right? I mean, these games, we can't sit there and talk about the Super Bowl and the goal is to win the Super Bowl and this and that. And then when a guy wins the Super Bowl, nothing changes. When you lose this game, it changes the trajectory of your narrative. If you win this game, this is a game that changes how people view you. So absolutely, yeah, Jalen Hurts has climbed to the top of the mountaintop. And while I do think him and Brock, I think Hurts is a great comparison for Brock. And I think the Niners ought to learn a lot from how the Eagles surrounded Hurts. But yeah, you have to give Jalen Hurts credit for the way he played in this game. He stood up to Spags and Chris Jones in this defense, and they had a great game plan, and he did it. To me, Saquon Barkley didn't do anything in this game. I don't think people realize how muted he was by Kansas City's defense. He only averaged 2.3 a carry. How did Philly kind of pick up the slack? Well, Jalen Hurts, he was the reason they won this game because Gainwell averaged 1.7 a carry, Barkley averaged 2 yards a carry, and it was Hurts who ran 11 times at over 6.5 yards a carry. That was huge, absolutely huge. And he took care of the ball. I mean, he had the 1 interception, but, they ran the ball 45 times or 67% of their snaps. And I was asking the question, when was the last time Kyle Shanahan ran the ball 67% of the time? It's probably going back to like those Green Bay, Minnesota playoff games when he didn't trust Jimmy to throw and they ran and ran and ran. But, man, it's not very often. But, yeah, you have to put –
You got to respect Kellen Moore for calling that game. You got to respect Kellen Moore for doing that. Because if you call it like that, no one's calling you a genius. If you want to get called a genius, you got to have, like, really flashy passing plays, explosive passing plays. Kellen doesn't have a particularly explosive offense, and he just ran the ball and won the Super Bowl. Good for him.
Well, and if you go back to last year, in the AFC title game, the Chiefs were on the road against a Ravens team that a lot of people thought was better. And what did they do? They just came out and they said, "Well, where's our advantage?" Well, we got Pacheco who's running well, and we got a really good interior line. And so they just ran the ball. They didn't just run it between the tackles. I mean, they literally ran it between the guards all the way down the field. And then when they got the third downs, they had Mahomes run, and they didn't take a chance of putting the ball in the air. And they leaned on their strength, and they ran the ball. And in this game, credit Philadelphia. 80% of the turnovers come in the passing game. They turned it over last time they got the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. This time they wanted to take better care of the ball. 23 passes, 45 runs. And their O-line just leaned on Philadelphia leaned on Kansas City and took away Chris Jones and won the game.
As far as these quarterbacks go, you think they're similar. A lot of people might say they're different, but I think a good comparison for both of them is Russell Wilson. I think they're both kind of similar to Russell Wilson in their ways, like Purdy with his elusiveness and Hurts with his straight-up rushing ability. But like both Purdy and Hurts and Russell Wilson, too, are Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks when they have top defense and a top running back. I mean, I think there's no shame in that. That's what Russell Wilson was. That's what Jalen Hurts is. That's what Brock Purdy is. If Brock Purdy is going to be winning a Super Bowl, he needs to have the kind of running back and defense that he had last year. Last year.
And I think also what you're saying, too, is you got 3 guys that are predicated, that, they're good decision makers.
Yeah.
But when when their equation erodes, like Phillies did last year, or Purdy's did this year, or Russell
Wilson, when he got older, and they wanted to let him cook. Like,
right.
Nah.
I mean, they're guys that have to exist on a strong running game, a strong O-line, and a strong defense, and also they got to make good decisions. I mean, Purdy this year, his regression came from he didn't make good decisions. And I think his regression also came from the fact that they couldn't really run it. I mean, the Niners, Kyle Shanahan even stopped trying to run the ball late in the year. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't run the ball when everybody knew they needed to run. And last year, the Eagles were really bad in the playoffs, and they just, it was mostly their pass defense, and they brought in Fangio, but it was also their offense as well. And this year, they got Saquon Barkley. They leaned on their rushing attack a lot more. I didn't think Hurts had a particularly great year by his standards, but he did just enough. And miraculously, when he got hurt, I don't know how he played through that. He did. They won some big games. Here's the one thing, Grant, that really stood out to me about the Super Bowl. I didn't realize this till after the game was over. How about this? This is pretty freaking amazing. The Chiefs and the Eagles were the Kansas City was plus 59. First of all, the Kansas City was 15-2. Philly went 14-3. So basically the same record. Kansas City was plus 59 in point differential. Philadelphia was plus 160. I mean, Kansas City had a worse point differential than Denver. They had a worse point differential than Tampa Bay.
See, that's why I picked the Eagles. I felt like when you looked at it on paper, you're like, oh, like this team is way better. But then it's like it's Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, and you're like, I can't pick against them. But on paper, it was clear, and then it played out that way.
Yeah, and Chase Sr. had a tweet Saturday. He's like, the Eagles are going to win this game, and it was just so like no ambiguity, no because of this or that, and it was just, and I'm like, this guy obviously feels like he's done the deep dive on the numbers, and feels like Philly's got the advantage.
And he called it. It's because he called it. This Philly D line is not going to get blocked. It's pretty much that simple, and that was the game.
I mean, they scored 101. They had 101. Point differential edge on Kansas City. I mean, that's massive.
And that's what's so crazy about this Eagles team is like, is Jalen Hurts really good? Yes. Has he surpassed Brock Purdy? Technically, yes. Could they have won this game with Kenny Pickett? No. Yes, because the Chiefs couldn't move the ball, like physically couldn't move the ball. Yes.
Well, I don't know if Kenny Pickett, period. I don't like Kenny Pickett. I don't even know that they like Kenny Pickett. But late in the year, Grant, the Eagles won a game with Kenny Pickett, and they won the next week with Tanner McKee.
I'm telling you, man, this team is incredible.
Yeah, they're really. It's a really. I mean, let me credit the guy who I think really deserves some credit, and that's Howie Roseman. And dude, Howie Roseman did what I did when I was in high school. I wrote a letter to every NFL team saying, "Hey, I think I should, could be a personnel guy." And, I got a lot of letters back, and so I'm sure he did as well, but they all said no. Then he went to Florida and tried it again, tried to get on with an NFL team. He got an interview with Mike Tannenbaum, who declined to hire him. Then he goes to Fordham, gets his law degree, tries to get in the NFL again. Finally, in 2000, the Eagles hired him as a salary cap intern to work in their front office. And he's been there ever since. Now he's been there for 25 years, and he's been promoted to general manager, and the guy doesn't miss. He had a phenomenal offseason. If you wanted to say what's the real reason that Philly is better than the Niners, it's because Howie Roseman has done a better job than John Lynch. I mean, and I love John Lynch, but Howie Roseman is the key factor there for the Eagles. Not that Sirianni's not a good coach. I'm not trying to say that, but I do think
he's the MVP of that operation.
I think Shanahan's probably still a better coach than Sirianni, but I do think that Roseman has to be given credit. This guy has done incredible things, and he looked at Mekhi Becton. Everybody else saw fat, out of shape, failed first-round pick offensive tackle. He saw a big, dominant player that could be slated in at right guard next to Lane Johnson and create a dominant line, and he signed him. And look at the results.